expose them to, working hard, the better. I think my mentality, to be honest with you, at that point wasn't, for them to work smart. It was just, they need to learn how to work hard. Later they can learn to work smart and to streamline the process and how to make it better and things like that. But at this age, just learn to work hard. I had a friend in high school that was a very intelligent guy. He would always say to me, Amit, you're going to be way more successful than me. And I said, how would you say that? He's like, I'm lazy. He would say he is lazy. He's lazy and he won't do certain things. And because of that, he's only going to go so far. And then years and years later, I met up with him and he's like, yeah, you it's exactly what I told you. I'm still lazy and look at you. You're not lazy at all. So, I might have to work harder at something, but I will persevere, where he would just say, forget it. I don't even want to do it. So I'd rather get my sons to sit there and work hard, because if they can combine that with working smart, I think you're like unstoppable.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Dad podcast. Today, I am excited to chat with Amit Gaglani. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did great.
Yes. All right. And I asked you the first time we talked if I was going to pronounce it correctly, and then I said that I would not mispronounce it, so I'm glad that I did this time. I'm glad I said it right. But really excited to chat with Amit, and looking forward to his story. Lots of business experience, 3 kids. I'm not going to go into too much depth on that because I want you to introduce your family, tell us about your business, and then we'll kind of go from there.
So I have 3 kids. Summer, who's 18 years old, in college, freshman at Lehigh, which is in Pennsylvania, and he's in a business school learning finance. And I texted him the other day just to see how he was doing, and he tells me, for once I actually like the stuff that I'm learning. I'm not just memorizing for the sake of memorizing. So that's a good thing. I have another son who's a sophomore in high school, Neil, and then I have a daughter who's 10 years old in 5th grade. So, they keep busy. And as you and I are recording, my 15-year-old's texting me saying, "Come pick me up, come pick me up." Like,
you're gonna have to hold on there, buddy.
Go to the library, do some studying, do some work. I own a company.
We're going to have to talk about priorities on business and kids, I think, later on, but we'll figure that out.
Well, the good thing is when they're 15, you can always tell them to go to the library and get some homework done, because he has tons of homework. So you can never say, "Oh no, I'm bored." Yeah. I own a company called AG Management Consulting, which is, it kind of morphed into a consulting business from a prior business that I sold to private equity, and some real estate experience that I had that was on the side of that. So, I kind of fell into something else, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I think you started off in physical therapy and running business.
Yeah, so I was trained to become a physical therapist, went through schooling for it. Then I decided I wanted to up my game in physical therapy, and I became a board certified clinical specialist in orthopedics, because I loved orthopedics. I loved post-surgical patients. I loved just loved learning about it, right? It's like one of those things, like my son is saying, like, I'm finally learning stuff that I really want to learn. Yeah. I can sink my teeth into, as opposed to memorizing. So I did that, and found out that became really easy to treat patients, but the business aspect of it was something that was daunting. And somebody gave me a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then all of a sudden, I know everybody says that book, but really I read the book and I started having an itch, started thinking in a completely different way. And then that same person gave me another book called E-Myth by Michael Gerber, how to systematize stuff. And then obviously once you had that in your head, it's just like you can't get rid of it. And I was like, well, what am I doing here? Why I'm building somebody else's business? Let me try to do this for myself. And I decided to go out on my own and open my own company. And then I built it from 2004 to 2017, every day in the business. And we'll talk about how I got my kids involved and, into that too. But then I sold it in 2017 to a private equity company, and then helped them build it. And we were about 100 offices across the nation. And then another private equity came and bought the whole thing out. So it was a fun ride.
That sounds awesome.
But because I was doing that the whole time while I was doing that, I had an itch about real estate. I just didn't want to be a landlord. And then I realized I can invest passively, and I learned all about that. Then I had a lot of friends who are physicians and surgeons and whatnot in the medical field. And they said, well, we'll jump in with you. So I would sometimes go to negotiate better rates with syndicators and things. And, that became its own business, believe it or not. Not negotiating, but being able to kind of vet out investments. And then after I was completely out of physical therapy, a consulting business just morphed out of all of that stuff that I
Mm-hmm.
was doing.
That's
So
awesome.
now I consult for healthcare stuff, healthcare physical therapy stuff, or healthcare private equity stuff, and then I also consult in with real estate syndicators for things that they need.
So I want to rewind a little bit and kind of go back to the genesis of where you kind of started, where you like growing up. What was it like growing up for you? Tell us a little bit about like your parents and what it was like for you growing up.
Yeah, so my parents came over from India. My father came over in the late '60s or mid '60s. He had a full scholarship at Rhode Island University, and he had a full scholarship to do a PhD in chemistry. Wasn't married at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and he came over and he was studying. His brother was over here. Incidentally, my father had four brothers and three sisters, one of the brothers was here in the U.S. It was in Poughkeepsie, New York area. So he went to Rhode Island University, and
Mm-hmm.
he was doing his PhD. After a couple of years, he realized, doing my PhD while all these guys are working out here, and then every time he would try to go for a job, they would tell him he's too overqualified, so nobody's hiring him. And he's banging his head against the wall. He's like, "What is this? Like, I'm overqualified. Nobody wants to hire me,"
Mm-hmm.
because they're all worried that he's going to leave. So like he was having such a hard time, he got frustrated. He's like, okay, well, I'm gonna stop doing my PhD, So he ended up leaving, and he had a master's, which he already had a master's, so he had a double master's.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then he went in India and got married and brought my mom back, and so we started a family in New Jersey.
Nice. All right. So how do we, I've always been curious on, so this is, you said in the late 60s. So what was it like for him kind of growing up in India? How did he decide to say, hey, I'm going to go to America for school? Like, was that a normal thing for folks? What does that kind of look like for him?
Yeah, so he knows the bigger opportunities are going to be over here in America, educationally and also for occupationally.
Mm-hmm.
So the larger universities, the bigger opportunities are here in the States. So he applied to different PhD programs, and because of that, he knew it was going to be a better life than what he had and could have in India and in raising us there. So really, honestly, it comes out of opportunity. And not it's funny because a lot of my friends will say, all Indian people are so smart. They come over and they're so smart. But I guess the reality is, if you look at it from a statistic standpoint, only the
Mm-hmm.
ones that got to a certain point of level of knowledge and a level of intelligence came over.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at is the people who could do it and who did
Yeah.
come over, right? Because they were able to achieve certain things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the others you don't see because they couldn't come over.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're looking at it, it's the second most populous country in the world. So, I mean, like, we have a very small percentage of them that are coming over here to begin
Yeah.
with. But again, our statistical variation is going to be a little bit different than what you're going to see across the board for there. So, um, all right. So, what was it like for you then growing up? You had immigrant parents coming here. What did they do for a living? What was it like for you kind of growing up?
Yeah, so my father was a chemist. He was an ink chemist. So when you think of an ink chemist, the easiest way to put it is if you're taking a shower and you look at a shampoo bottle, the shampoo bottle has ink all over it, but that ink is specially formulated so it just doesn't wash off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the person who has to formulate that stuff is somebody like my father. So he will look at the industry that he's making things for and say, okay, well, this chemical needs to be able to be heat resistant. It needs to be waterproof. It needs to be this. It needs to be that. It needs to be, shiny. It needs to be, certain pigments and things like that. So he worked for companies. BASF was a large company that he worked for. Other companies that he worked for. These are some like international companies that he was on he would work in a laboratory and he would kind of formulate different ink compounds with the whatever requirements that the compound needed. So he was doing that. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in the beginning, but then later she started, she wanted to work too. But she would just get jobs in the very beginning with, let's say a department store. And then it was from one thing to another thing
Mm-hmm.
and at the very end, she was working as a accounts receivable department at an aeronautical firm. So she was doing that and they were basically raising us. So, or a lot of time, actually at a certain age, I would just come home from school and just, have my own chores to do while my mom was at work.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely recall doing that myself rather often. Dad was gone doing two or three jobs. Mom was out probably a job or two, and then hey,
Yes.
here I sit doing what we do, and I got homework, and then we go
And
to
then
do what
my
I do.
father took a second job too. He was selling these vacuum cleaners called Electrolux. I don't know if you've ever heard of that vacuum
Yeah,
cleaner.
yeah, yeah.
So he literally went door to door selling these vacuums. And like
That's
now you
awesome.
think about it, you're like, that's crazy. Who goes door to door lugging around a big vacuum cleaner? Yeah, he was doing that because he was trying to make additional income. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, you're like, somebody works full time. They're finished at 5 o'clock. Then they come home to
Hmm.
do that. They're literally going door to door in a neighborhood, walk around with a vacuum cleaner, going in and saying, "Let me show you how good this vacuum is. Let me vacuum your carpet for you." So he must have done that so many times, and then but you learn something from it. And now
Yeah,
I look back on it like, man, that took some cojones to be able to sit
yeah,
there day after day going out there trying to do it, as a side hustle.
yeah. For sure. And I mean, it also teaches you a lot, I would imagine, about, work ethic and what it is to drive and to sell and to
Yeah.
do things, like you got to witness what it was to kind of push through that. Right. Did he do that because there wasn't like a lot of money in chemist type of stuff, or was it just because he felt like he just needed to keep on working, or how did that come about to get
I
the
think
second
there,
job?
there was a couple things that were going on. I think honestly, my father and his brother had invested in a condo that was in Florida. I think it was called Cocoa Beach or something like that,
Hmm.
and it didn't turn out to be what it was supposed to be. So they were
Hmm.
losing money there. So I think my father decided to take a second job just so he can recoup some of the losses that he was getting. So their personal experience from real estate was very bad. They would not
Yeah, I
touch
was
real
just going to
estate
say, but
with a
you
10-foot
did real
pole
estate,
after that.
man. I bet not.
They didn't
Yeah.
like the idea of it at all. And they hated the idea of real estate after that thing. So, but I think that's why he primarily did that for a certain amount of years, you
Okay.
know?
Yeah. When we complete side story, but my wife, when she came back from Iraq, literally the day I went and picked her up from the airport, she comes back, and we go back to the house, and like not 10 minutes later, this salesman knocks on the door with a vacuum, sitting there trying to sell us a Kirby vacuum, and I was like, no, please go away. Like my wife literally just came back from Iraq. She's been gone for a while. Like she was my fiance at the time, but it was like I just go away. But my wife and I are way too nice, and we let him in the house anyways. And it took him forever. It's like, all right, are you done trying to sell us a vacuum? So that poor guy is working a second job for his kids too. So we'll see. Hopefully he sold to somebody else and it
Yeah.
wasn't to us. But no, I've heard a lot of good things, anyways, about those types of sales programs, and then the Cutco knife folks,
Yeah.
the sales program that they have. Like another abundance guy bought Cutco from his son just to get like
Yeah.
I've heard great things about Cutco, anyways. But great sales stuff, great program. Listening to how they kind of connect you, it was really good. So I mean, there's a lot of solid knowledge you can get from doing those types of programs. But all right, so anyways, enough with the sidebar. So you got to witness your mom being mostly the one present by the sounds of things. Did your dad mostly have two jobs, or was that just for a short time doing the vacuum thing?
That was just for a short time. I remember my father
Okay,
would come home and he would be working on the house. Honestly, he'd be home at
okay,
5 o'clock, and while my mom's making dinner, he's like either taking wallpaper down or trying to put something up. He was a handy guy, so he actually didn't know how to do some things, but he would learn. He literally
yeah,
would learn everything that he could from different people or from just reading different things. We didn't have the internet then, so
hmm,
somehow, some way, he would learn. And they were constantly doing things to the house. He was also an avid uh, tennis player, so he'd play tennis constantly if he could get an opportunity. My father had no interest in eating, literally food. He would be like,
hmm,
okay, if I have to eat to survive, I will, but I want to go play. So he,
yeah,
he was just like a guy that would love to play. Any sport, everywhere, he would just be there for it. So,
nice.
which
That's good.
actually, my brother and I love to play sports, so it's probably from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine. Did you play sports growing up too?
I played soccer for 7 or 8 years, and then I switched over to tennis. Then I played
Okay,
tennis for at least same amount of time.
okay, nice. So how like you've got a chemist for a dad, stay-at-home mom. How did you decide that you wanted to go be a physical therapist? How did that come?
So in high school, I think it was 10th grade or so, I took this test, maybe a personality profile test. It just basically was like given by the school, like what you would be good at, what
Hmm.
industries, or, it kind of showed me things that I'd be good with people. And it showed me that a list of like industries. One of them
Mm-hmm.
was physical therapy, and at the time, I didn't know what physical therapy was. I liked the idea of medicine, but I also didn't like certain aspects of medicine. It just sounded very daunting to me. But physical therapy just sounded interesting, and I started researching more about it. And I said, okay, well, let me volunteer in a hospital and let me see what it's like. And then I just saw the
Mm-hmm.
interaction between the patient and the physical therapist, and I kind of liked the one on one, the multiple times a week, really getting to know them, getting to know their families, and getting to know their needs. So I was like, oh, I could see myself really doing this. Statistically, they said this is going to be a great profession. There's going to be have a lot of security in it. And you're
Mm-hmm.
going to do really well in this profession. So I said, okay. So I just kept furthering that and just uh, pursued it in college.
Nice. Yeah, I took one of those, if I recall correctly, but I signed up for the Air Force at 16 years old. Like, I just knew that that's what I was going
Oh,
to
you
do.
knew.
So, and part of it was I knew because I didn't know any difference. Then I knew because that's what I wanted to do. It was just both of my parents were Air Force. It was like, well, this is what I do. This is what little bars do. I had no idea that there were other options out there. And I wish I did know, right? But I'm glad at the same point, like it worked out the way it did. Um, but every time I played one of those, I already knew exactly what I was going to be doing. I knew what job I was going to be in the military. I already knew what I worked on those tests in the way that was going to get me what I wanted, which was aircraft maintenance. So that's always where I went. But I wish that I would have been exposed to a little bit more to know that even college was an option, let alone something other than the Air Force. Um, but when you went to PT school, well, let me actually fast forward back again to to having the kiddos. Now, when you are raising your kids, one of the reasons I like to ask about people's dads and how they grew up is because it often adjusts how we raise our kids based on what we saw with our parents. Like maybe we didn't get enough of love and affection from our parents, so we just like shower our kids in it. Maybe we our parents never saw us at sport games, so we're at them all the time, or maybe like whatever it is. So as you're raising your kids right now and you're looking at it, like what kind of things do you look at, or have you, or even had the chance to even stop and look back at how you were raised that is causing you to do certain things right now as a parent?
So I think coming from India, my parents were very fiscally minded because you don't have a lot of money, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of know that I have to take care of the money that I make. So my parents would literally every weekend they would write down like their expenses, they would write down their incomes. They kind of had a budget of this is what they could spend. So I guess I got a sense of budgets and things like that in my mind, and that's what I've kind of instilled on my kids to always to look at your numbers and obviously know what you have before you go to spend, and the philosophy of like telling them that you don't charge it on a credit card unless you already have that much in the bank account, and at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the month you pay off the credit card. There's no revolving. You don't let it roll over.
Yeah.
Just telling them that those things. I remember that was very big for my parents, like just making sure they're taking care of their financial obligations and setting
Man,
aside
I don't know if
funds
it's
and
your
doing
internet
all
or
that.
my internet, but one of us is struggling today.
Oh man, I don't
Yeah, I was
even
just
know.
saying, I don't know if it's your internet or my internet, but one of us is struggling. It's tough. Um, I venture to guess it's mine if I've got my kids playing around on the internet out there. But can you hear me now? We good?
Yeah, you actually
Sweet.
never went out verbally, so
Oh, well, lovely. Then people can hear me ramble. So that is one beautiful thing is I really don't like to edit these podcasts at all. So if there's bloopers in there, guess what? They stay. Um, uh, but, uh, but so when you're I'm always intrigued by children of immigrants, just because, like, my wife
yeah.
is first generation American. Her mom is from Cuba, and her dad is from Spain. So when you have the amalgamation of those two together, and then you look at the offspring, like the things that she received from her parents, like I had never knew what a savings account was. Like it just didn't like. It wasn't there. My parents didn't really save money. I never saw somebody save money, so it didn't make sense to me that anybody would save money. But her mom being from Cuba, was like, hey, we're holding on to everything we can. We don't know what's going to happen. Like it's under the mattress. It's hidden behind pictures. Like you never know what. Like we have to make sure that we're taking care of. And so it's very interesting to kind of look at how it goes because for the most part, we just look at Johnny down the street when we were growing up, and he was just like me, and we were the same. But I love being able to pull apart what um, children of immigrants kind of see because they have such a different insight into life. Now, when you were growing up, did you see a difference in the way you were being raised by? Because like my wife never really saw it, I don't think, until I kind of explained to her what I was seeing, right? But did you see as you were growing up, like the way you were raised and how your parents were very fiscally responsible and paying attention to those things was different than what your friends were
Oh yeah.
seeing, or was that yeah? What is it that you found when you were seeing that? Like, how did that kind of spark any
So
conversation or thoughts as you were growing up?
I noticed right away when I was growing up, like certain friends of mine, like let's say for Christmas, they would just get showered with Christmas presents, yet they
Hmm.
couldn't take care of some other basic necessities. They couldn't do certain other things. Where my parents never really showered us with tons and tons of gift. They would say, what's one thing you'd want? So they would make sure we got the one thing, and then maybe a small item here or there. But I was like, man, we don't get as much as the other guys. But then the other guys couldn't do like so many basic things. But my
Yeah.
parents always like took care of the basics. That was not a problem. We always went away on vacations in the summertime. They always planned to make sure that the basics and the big things were always taken care of, and they would set aside money for those types of things. Whereas I had friends that just never did. You could tell
Hmm.
that their parents just never had it together. They would just, if they got money, they would spend the money. If they got money, they would spend the money. But then they would have these gaps where they didn't. They just couldn't do things. And the mentality, oh, we can't afford that or we can't do that. My parents didn't really say things like that. My dad would joke around sometimes to say that. I think when we were really young, we'd be like, Dad, how much do you make? Dad, how much do you make? And of course he says, I don't make much, or the garbage man makes more than me, or this or that, just to kind of play down things. As we got older, we would just realize, okay, well, mom and dad don't like to spend on this, or mom and dad don't like to
Yeah.
spend on that. Honestly, I don't think you have enough knowledge to understand like why they do what they do, right?
Yeah.
You don't sit in there and think, yeah, but we always have food on the table. Yeah, but we always do this. We always have clothes. We always have this. Do I have
Hmm.
the best clothes? Do I have the latest sneakers all the time? No, you know, but then again, that's not how they were raised in India too. They're not
Yeah.
in India. They're not like, oh, let fashion icons. It was more or less take care of the basics. So I noticed that there was a big difference between like how I was being raised and others. Now, granted, at the time, I didn't think it was the best thing. I was like, oh, this kind of stinks. I don't have this and I don't have that and I don't get this and I don't
Yeah.
get that. But you're a kid, right? You're comparing against everybody else. And of course, you
Yeah.
don't compare the positive things, you compare the negative things.
Of
But
course.
then as you start
Yeah.
getting older, you start realizing, that, oh, this is the reason why. And when you start working out there and you start having bills and you're like, okay, well, I
Hmm.
gotta make sure I plan for, I'm a big believer in planning things out, especially finances. That you have to have reserves, you have to have this, amount here or there,
Hmm.
just, have things set aside for responsibilities. And I tell my kids, not sure how much they actually believe or listen to what it is, but you'd figure it's got to penetrate somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. And it's funny because the one thing that I asked if, what you got from your parents that you pass on to your kids. And the first thing you said was like budgets and, and saving money and that type of
Financial
thing. So,
responsibility. Yeah.
do your kids pick up rather well? Like, was that something that you started at a young age? Was that something that, kind of, it took a little while to grow into, or how did you start to expose them to budgets? And I'm assuming, to add on to that, is that's kind of why you started doing the business side of it as well on your business. When you left, is all of that going together? Like, this is just what I know, is what I like to do. So I'm teaching it to my kids and I'm doing it myself.
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. In my own weekly budget that I would look at to see, what were the expenses, what was the income, where are we lining up with all that type of stuff. But with the kids too, like they knew I was very much into looking at statistics. I would look at my statistics once a week. So one of the responsibilities, at that time, I think it was 8 or 10 years old, Summer, who's now 18, was doing was I would have my office staff write down certain key statistics that I needed, right? He would take those statistics and plot them into this program that I have, which would make a graph for me. So I can easily take a look at the graph of all these statistics. He got so good at doing it, he would recognize that, hey, this employee here over here, they're not doing as well as they were before, or something's up over in this area because look, the statistics are off.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we would see that, hey, either somebody's not calculating something right or somebody's not doing their job properly. So I think he understood from a young age that these statistics mean something,
Yeah.
in and of itself. You can't run the company by looking at the statistics, but you do find key areas that something could be wrong. And that way you can look into that specific area.
Yeah, for sure.
And then he would get paid on a weekly basis. He would get paid for doing that. And then we would tell him, and I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but let's say it was $10, but you can't have all 10 of it. You have to pretend that 2 of it doesn't exist and you can only play or do something with the $8. The two is savings that you will never be able, not, I shouldn't say never, that will just sit there and we'll deposit that in the bank and that'll be for a rainy day
Mm-hmm.
or for in the future. Did he like it? No. But that's what it was. It's like you have to set money aside for savings.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he knew.
I never learned that. That's for sure. It took me a long time to learn the whole savings side. So well done on teaching it early. But, so when did you transition? So how old were your kids? Your oldest is 17. You said right now 18. My
18.
notes aren't working. 18. So and you talked about. I mean, that was 10 years ago. You said he was 8 or 10 when he was doing that.
About, yeah.
So when did you transition from employee to business owner or entrepreneur?
Myself? When did I do
Yeah.
it? Probably in 2004 is when I started opening my practice. Prior to that, I think I graduated in 1998 or something like that. And then I opened my own in 2004.
So for 6 years, then you were working for somebody else, learning the practice, doing all your stuff.
Yeah, I think even prior to that, I started some stuff, but I think I officially said I was leaving. So what happened
was
with
was one of the impetuses.
I ran 2 offices for somebody else. And I don't know if you heard that, but I ran 2 offices for somebody else.
Yep.
And then my hours that I made for myself were Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all day. I would work 13 and a half hours a day. So it let me, Tuesday, Thursdays, I was free. So Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I opened up my own practice, which was, very far from my original practice that I worked for somebody else. So I kind of started that process going right away. So, for a while I was busting my hump, as you could tell, if you're working all day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays, until I was generating enough income that it was matching or more than matching my full-time salary. So then when I left my full-time salary, it wasn't like I was hurting. There was no point. So that made it an easier transition financially.
Because it lined up pretty well because in 2004, your sounds like already replaced that income with your own personal business, and then 2005 is when your first child was born. So like, okay, we've got some freedom. I'm running my own companies. I'm kind of able to do this now. Was that a strategic decision to say let's wait to have kids until then, or was it just like that's just how the time worked?
No, we were actually pregnant at the time when I left my job. I knew I get 8 months pregnant or so, and I said, okay, now it's I could leave the job and not feel it financially. And I wasn't utilizing the money that I was making in my private practice. It was sitting in a bank account, so I had saved it, so I knew it was there. It was almost like an emergency fund. So I still maintained living off of what I was making my salary on. So it wasn't like I doubled my salary and I was like, oh, look at the life that we have. I can have a fancy car. I can do this. I was still living off the primary income. And then the other amount, I just put it into savings. And then, if I needed to pull from that, I could. But by that time, I had enough flow coming in that it was just give me more. Now all of a sudden, I had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday free. So my income generating hours increased significantly.
That's it. I think that I'm very guilty of this myself as I'm still, as an adult, learning a little bit more about being wise financially. Like I said, I didn't really know what a savings account was until I met my wife. So, my life changed dramatically from that to never having invested to now, buying hundreds of apartment doors and running businesses and doing all this stuff. So huge difference in my life. But I still catch myself going back into some of my old habits of, overspending or, I never went into a bunch of debt, and I'm still, not a fan of going into a bunch of debt by any means, unless it's good debt. But very wise move of you to say, hey, let's just still stick to the one salary. Let's, stick this stuff aside and keep it rolling. Was that something that do you now, or did you then have business coaches on how to kind of start your own stuff, or did you just kind of play around with it and figure it out as you went?
So actually, that's a really interesting story. What happened, I guess, up till now, up to me starting my practice, no, I didn't have business coaches. I didn't have anything. I actually just had friends that were opening their private practice. So basically, I would call my friends up, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Asking all these people. Well, once I started, my own private practice, and I was kind of going along and I was building my patient volume, and I realized, I said, if I keep doing this, I'm going to max out at some point, but it's still not the kind of income that I really want to make. I need to figure out a better play. I keep asking Joe Schmo and Fred over here, what they're doing. What do they know? they're just doing whatever they think is right. But like I was
Yeah.
trained, professionally trained to be a physical therapist, but nobody's training me to be a business owner. I'm just taking different
Mm-hmm.
stabs at it, and some things work, some things don't. So there's got to be a better way. So some people told me about different CEO programs that you can get or actually go to and learn how to be a business owner. So a friend of mine told me about this company down in Florida, and I said, okay, let me go down. They had a free thing that I went to. I went there and I listened to them, and believe it or not, they were very specific to physical therapy. They literally will train you to be an owner of a physical therapy company and a CEO, and be able to how to actually increase your operations and grow. And I was like, this is what I need. Like I need this
Mm-hmm.
type of structure to get me from A to where I want to, A to Z. So I had, I think, $55,000 saved up in the bank by that point, and they were offering me a program, which is basically like a 5-year CEO training program for like, I don't know, I forget how much it was, but I put down exactly $35,000 right then and there. And
Wow.
everybody else was looking at me like, what are you, crazy? I was like, if I don't put it down and go all in, it won't happen. And if it
Yeah.
doesn't happen, all I'm going to be doing is 10 years from now going, I'm still doing the same thing I was doing before, and I'm still making the same complaints that I was complaining about before, but I'm not doing anything about it. So once I put that money down, I was 100% vested. There was no, oh, let me back out of it. It was like, I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
I will do the training because I just paid all that money that took me all this time to save up, and I'm in, and I know this company can get me to where I needed to.
Yeah, and I think that there's some wisdom in that thought process too, because people, you're not going to get all of the information people want for the rest of their life, and any business they want, they can go find on YouTube. But they don't do it, right? They could say all day long they want to do something. They don't go to YouTube and go research it. Most people are going to sit on their butt and do nothing.
Yeah.
But if you put money down and you say, hey, I'm going to spend some money on this and I'm going to go make a difference, you'd be amazed what you're able to accomplish, right? Because all of a sudden you're like, hey, I put money into this, and I'm not going to waste that money. This is going to work. I'm going to put the effort into it. So
they coached
what was
me.
it?
So that was my first forte into coaching. They coached me all the way through, like, how do I have to do everything? I would go down there. I would fly down there. I would spend 3 days, learn a specific course, whether it's hiring and team building, whether it's HR, whatever it was. I would learn that. Then I would go back to my practice and implement it for the next 8 weeks. And then I would go back down, learn something else and implement it and add it. So I would just constantly learn something and add it into my practice. And you would see my practice just slowly kind of moving in the right direction. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of mistakes I made still.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hired the wrong people, had to fire them, had people steal from me, had to get rid of them, just do different things. But yeah, mistakes were made.
That's phenomenal. Now, what was it like? Did you expose your kids to that level of education that you were getting as well? And did they understand at all what it was that you were doing? I don't know what age they were.
They were too young. They were like, I only had my oldest, and he was probably not even 1 at the time. But over the next 5 years, they all got little bits and pieces, but it was the management training stuff that I was learning that wasn't really applicable to what they were. I mean, they were infants. So, but as they got older, they would learn more and more. And then my Neil, who's 15 now, I had him volunteer at my center, at my physical therapy place, which was outpatient orthopedic type of patients. So he would sit there and he would come in, and I would tell him that you're going to volunteer. And, we had other people that were doing the same job, but they were getting paid for it, and he wasn't getting paid for it. And I told him what he's responsible to do, and he would go ahead and do it. And then I noticed that he was just sitting around, just watching everybody. And I told him, listen, if I ever see you sitting around again, you're not, actually, was he getting paid? I might have paid him. I forgot what it was. That you're not going to make a penny. Like, I don't pay people for sitting around. Like, you got to be moving. From that minute on, he never sat still. Other employees would come and complain, like, dude, you're making us look bad. You're making us look bad. Like, he won't stop. So he got it in him that he has to keep hustling. He has to keep moving, whether he's opening a door for somebody, whether he's, cleaning up after a table. He was just making everybody else look bad. So I think he understood, like, that's the way it works.
Kids in general, they really want to be useful anyway, just like any human being, right? Even whether they're a kid or not, like, they want to be useful. 100%. I think our lack of desire to be useful, it comes because of our abuse throughout the years. It doesn't because we all
Yeah.
want to be useful in some way, shape, or form. So that's one of the reasons I really want to include my kids a little bit more into business stuff and try to figure out how I can bring them in and give them a task and help them kind of work. And like, no, you're really helping the company, you're really helping the business, you're helping our family grow. And it's just trying to find the right ways to be able to do that. So, what was it that led you to making that decision to bring your kids in and expose them to that level of interaction inside of the business?
They were of age. Honestly, they were just old enough that they got it. And I said the earlier I
Mm-hmm.
expose them to, working hard, the better. I think my mentality, to be honest with you at that point, wasn't, for them to work smart. It was just, they need to learn how to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
Later they can learn to work smart and to streamline the process and how to make it better and things like that. But at this age, just learn to work hard. I had a friend in high school that, was a very intelligent guy. He would always say to me, Amit, you're going to be way more successful to me than me. And I said, how would you say that? He's like, I'm lazy. He's like, he would say he is lazy. He's lazy and he won't do certain things. And because of that, he's only going to go so far. And then years and years later, I met up with him and he's like, yeah, you it's exactly what I told you. I'm still lazy and look at you. You're not lazy at all. So, I might have to work harder at something, but I will
Mm-hmm.
persevere, where he would just say, forget it. I don't even want to do it. So I'd rather get
And
my sons to sit there and work hard, because if they can combine that with working smart, I think you're like unstoppable.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think work ethic can outperform just about anything, right? I mean, you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you just don't apply yourself, then you're not going to be successful at all. But
That's
you can be of
exactly.
mediocre intelligence, and you can crush life. I think it's
As long as you're
I
consistent
can't
and you
remember his
just
name.
keep going at it
Yeah,
again and again.
yep. Consistent action makes a huge difference. I can't remember his name. Impact theory guy. He spoke at one of the abundance events recently. Why can't I think of his name? But anyways, he talks about how it's he's not very smart, but yeah, he just like he will never quit, and it's a complete lie. You can listen to him talk and realize they're smart, but but it is one of those things that it hurts me to hear somebody say that they're lazy and not doing anything about it. I do that to myself from time to time too. So I mean, it hurts me that I do it to myself, where I'm like, I know that I should be doing something different than I am, but man, it feels good to just sit here with my feet up and be a lazy bum. But to do it to the point where you just know for years that's just going to be you, like that's heartbreaking that people do that. So, but we see it every day on that people do that constantly. So, um,
And I
so
gotta believe from what you just mentioned that a lot of, my work ethic must come from the way I saw my father. Like, he was not a lazy
mhm,
man at all. Nobody would ever, 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 ever accuse my father of lazy. They would actually say the opposite, that he just doesn't sit still. Like, he would never sit still. Just
yeah,
constantly doing something.
yeah, and I think I mean, that's such a valuable thing to be able to see, and I think that's one of the benefits too for me working from home. And I've been going back and forth on how I want to continue to work from home, or try to find somewhere to work during the week from time to time. I think there's a benefit in my kids seeing how hard it is that I'm in. Like, I mean, granted, I'm sitting in an office. It's not like they're watching me swing a hammer, but like, I'm always on phone calls. I'm always doing something. I'm always trying to be active and make a difference in what's going on. And I think that's valuable for kids to be able to see. I wish maybe that I could bring my kids into like a practice like you did, where you could literally see like the impact. Like, I brought my kids up to Atlanta. We invested in a assisted living facility, so I brought them up to that,
Oh,
showed them around, and said, "Hey, check this out! Like, these are the changes we're having. These are the people's lives who we're going to be able to impact. Like, imagine if we had to bring grandma in here, what kind of experience would she have right now? Probably not that great, but by the time we're done, it's going to be amazing, And like, trying to show them how that all works. But sadly, that's 8 hours away from me. But
yeah.
I would like to think that's an impactful thing to be able to do. So exposing them to that work ethic, I think, is extremely important. Um, you know, it's again, not that my dad worked his butt off a lot, but I never got to really see it. I just saw that he wasn't there. So
Yeah.
to me, that was a very big difference. And I think that's partly why I like working from home too. Is that A, I'm here, and B, they get to see me.
Yeah.
But yeah, the when you were building your business, what was it that you thought was the most important part of building it? Like, as you were, I mean, obviously, it sounds like, anyways, you're a very numbers oriented person. But what did you find you struggled at, and what did you find was kind of some of the more important parts that you didn't think of as you were building your business?
So I can, it's funny because the high school test told me I would be good at people. but it was great with people when it came to patients, right? You know, I could
Hmm.
easily help a patient. I could easily explain to them and they could get it and they would feel like connected with me. And I could have like 3, 4 patients at one time in physical therapy and each one feels like they're getting, you know, 100% attention. But when it
Hmm.
came to employees, it was a very different time frame. It was very different like thing. I couldn't understand like how they didn't see what I saw. Like
Hmm.
I couldn't understand. I'm like how are you making these mistakes? Like I don't get it. So I think I realized that, you know, I really need a good operations person that can
Hmm.
somehow break the stuff down to their level and they can get it, because I just wasn't able to, you know, move the masses when it came to certain things. You know, if somebody was a good strategic thinker, I could have a conversation with them, explain to them, and they could take it and they could actually run with it. But to the other people, I'm literally telling them, okay, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Then I'm
Hmm.
having to follow up with them and constantly. So I'm like literally watching over them constantly. So, and I felt my time and energy were better utilized elsewhere. So had I done it again, I would probably make sure that I'm hiring somebody that was really good with, you know, from a people person point of view for employees. You know, they were good at executing. They were good at executing. I was good at the higher level stuff. I knew what I needed to see. I knew what statistics I needed to change. But getting
Hmm.
some of the lower level people to do the things that needed to do was like, you know, hitting my head against the wall all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I think that we do the same thing with apartment buildings, right? One of the things we teach people is finding somebody that has the opposite mentality as you, but yet your goals align on where you want to be. So, you know, if you're a really good numbers person, find somebody who's really good with people and actually engaging, because a lot of times numbers people aren't so great with people. Yeah, just because of the way that their brains work. Like I'm super logical, good with numbers, emotions don't really click very well with me. So as I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody and
Yes.
empathize, I struggle. I'm just like, look, just this is what you need to do, and then I
So
walk away.
that's me. That's me.
Okay.
At the end of the
Yeah.
day, you know, yes, you feel this, you feel that, but this is what needs to get done.
Yeah.
So put it aside and get to what needs to get done. And I think a lot of times as a business owner, you know that there's all these things going on, but you got to get to it. Like
Yeah.
you got to get to it. Like
Yeah.
I put the other stuff aside and I was like, I got to get to it because I need to, it's time to make the donuts. So it's like, you know,
Yeah.
you got to get to it.
Yeah. No, I love the reference. That made me chuckle. Um, but so, how long was it until you did realize that you needed to hire that type of person to kind of take over that side?
So as I started growing my company in my offices, I had one office, then I had two offices. As I started going over two offices, I definitely needed people who were managing each site properly and could
Hmm.
understand, and that they would talk to their people. Yeah. So as long as I was hiring good people on that area, then they would do a good job. Sometimes they weren't always, you know, great people because they were in it for, they had the me mentality. They were more in it for them as opposed to their,
Hmm.
you know, people underneath them. Or I had the total opposite. They were so into the people underneath them, they wouldn't make them anybody do anything. And I
Yeah.
was like, you're actually hurting them because you're hurting their ability to get more pay. I can't pay them for doing less. You know, if you
Yeah.
don't like steer the ship in the right way and you just constantly get them to do less work, there is no more funds to pay somebody, you know?
Hmm. And it ruins the growth of the
So,
company, because if people are doing the jobs they're not paid to do, then now the company's not growing the way it's supposed to, because you're not doing the job you're supposed to do. And, you know, like,
right.
yeah. And I
Sometimes
think employee,
explaining that, you know,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say sometimes explaining that to certain people, it doesn't click. They just don't get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I look at that with parenting in a semi different way, but yes, similar, right? Where you have some of these parents that they will do everything they can for their kids and wrap them up in a bubble to make
Yeah.
sure they never get hurt. They don't learn how to be, you know, this is the same reason I complain all the time about a bunch of 40-year-old boys walking around instead of 40-year-old men. Well, you were coddled so much growing up all the time, and then the society has coddled you, and now all of a sudden you're 40 years old and you're still a boy, right? We need to let people go and work and go figure out to do their job and stay focused on what they're doing and not be coddled all the time, so that we can have growth in society and growth in our family. So, um, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I'd love to dig down into that if you have any ideas or thoughts on that too.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you can tell my thoughts if I'm telling my whatever 8-year-old, 10-year-old son that you got to look at statistics, you got to put him in, and don't
Valid,
get the idea
valid.
that he was happy about doing the work. He'd rather have the money and not do the work. And I'm like, that doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. And
Mhm.
and if you don't do it, you're not going to get paid. And we fired him. He got fired too because he wasn't doing it on time. He wasn't doing it. I was like, you're fired. You're not getting
How old
paid
was he when he
anymore.
got fired?
So it's like, they have to learn the hard reality too.
How old was he when he got fired?
That's probably about a year into it. He's
Ah,
probably about
nice.
9. But I mean, he's like any
Fire a
9-year old. He'd
9-year-old. I
rather do
like it.
other things than to do that. And he
Yeah.
would get his statistics on a certain day, and he's got to put them in at a certain time. And it's not like he had homework at 9 years old that was keeping him so busy. He just
Yeah.
didn't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean,
literally, it would take him 15 minutes, and it was like 15 minutes too long. And you're sitting there going, like, what do you mean?
yeah. I was talking to my son yesterday. He's 9 right now. Well, he's about to be 9. Next month he'll be 9. But I was trying to figure out, like, okay, well, we're doing homeschool and we're going through the whole homeschool process. I'm like, all right, well, trying to time out and doing what you're supposed to be doing and like managing your schedule. And granted, he's 9, so there's only so much managing that I'm going to be able to do,
Yeah.
or only so much managing he's going to be able to do, I should say. But it still kills me. Like, I'll go somewhere. Literally like 6 hours later, I went and worked from a coffee shop on Tuesday. And I come home and I was like, all right, what did you get done while I was gone? And he was like, oh, I just sat back down to work on something. I said, dude, I've been gone for 6 hours. 6 hours. What do you mean you would have?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm like, okay, well, you're definitely going to be the person that needs a little bit more micromanagement style, clearly,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
again, he's 8 years old, 9 years old. So I'm just happy that he's doing some work independently and trying to figure it out, which is great. But what
Oh,
sort of
even when they get
advice?
older,
Go ahead.
you're still constantly on them. So, like my
Yeah.
15-year-old is very good, very studious, but it's also a personality thing with him. His personality is
Mhm.
way more lax, way more like, okay,
Yeah.
which is actually, to be honest with you, I'd rather him be that way than the other way. So he lets certain
Mhm.
things go sometimes, but now he's trying to. He himself realizes that he kind of needs to kind of. To hone his skill of just paying attention a little bit more and not letting certain things go because he'll miss an assignment or this or that. So,
Yeah.
I don't want him to get to the point where he's so anal that he just stops enjoying everything. So
Yeah.
it's okay. I actually love his personality. So, but
Nice.
yeah, you still have to keep after them, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, and part of it, I think with my oldest is he is very anal with things and he hates to not not get things right. So sometimes I think that it's almost an
Uh,
avoidance thing. Like, why even, I don't even want to do it right now because I don't want the stress of having to do it perfectly. So it's like, okay, well, how do
yeah,
I balance? Like, I don't know how to fix that side. And fix is probably the wrong word, but I don't know how to target that in a positive direction as opposed to a detrimental direction because it can totally tear somebody down if they keep going down that direction. So, but boy, any advice on that?
yeah. Have him do stuff that he can't win at, and let him learn how to fail.
Oh, yeah,
Because if he doesn't learn how to fail at this age, when he gets older, it's going to be that much worse.
yeah. Well, I will. I will take that
Obviously,
note.
you're going to tailor things. You're going to tailor things to his personality, but they need to learn how to fail. I mean, everybody talks about it all the time, but we as parents don't like to see them struggling and things like that. But
Yeah.
maybe even start with small things. I don't know, a puzzle that he's going to have a hard time doing, and just know that he's going to
Mm-hmm.
have a hard time doing it, and say it's okay if you don't get it right. It's all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
We tried the for like 2 years, not extremely consistently, but Sarah Blakely, I think, Sarah Blakely, the Spanx girl. She
Oh yeah.
when she was growing up, her dad used to always ask every day at the dinner table, "What did you fail at today?" To try to encourage them to fail at something. Like, go out and fail because that's the only way you're going to learn. As long as you're failing forward, you're like, it's okay. So we kept trying to ask him that to encourage that thought process, and it doesn't. He would just look and be like, I didn't kick a soccer ball well. I'm like, no, like, you're not trying hard enough if that's what you failed at. But it's
I think I
such
lost you there.
a tough balance. Um,
Yeah.
to figure out how to make sure that I'm raising strong-willed kids that are willing to fail and move forward versus being bubbled and coddled all the time. So I don't know.
What grade is he in? Fourth grade?
Fourth grade, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
he'll start coming across things in school that he can't say no to, that he has to do. So
yeah, for sure. Yep, and I'm doing what I can to force some of that stuff. But so, what advice would you give? Since you are one who has already included your kids into the business side, what advice would you give on including the kids into the business? What would you try them avoid, and what would you like? Hey, there are certain things just in the business you definitely want your kids to avoid, and what things would you encourage dads to bring their kids in on?
Probably not a good idea asking your children to fire someone. That's probably
Oh,
not the
okay.
best
All
idea.
right.
So I
Yeah,
would
I'll take
avoid
that note
that.
down.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
No,
that's a
honestly,
good learning
that conversation.
experience. So,
They don't need to be the one who does the firing, but they need to know that people do get fired. And I used to
yes.
tell my kids, this, that I didn't fire that person. They fired themselves. I gave them
Yeah.
plenty of opportunity to correct their behavior, correct their actions, and they chose not to do it. So I don't really feel bad because I gave them those chances.
Hmm.
So I think that's an important thing because I think sometimes kids have an idea, and it might be from television, it might be from other things that hey, if you're firing someone, you're taking away their livelihood, you're
Yeah.
taking away their ability. And I sit there and I tell them they fired themselves, and maybe this job isn't right for them. They're going to find something that
Hmm.
is right for them. So I think that
Yeah.
explanation of a very simple thing that they can just take away with them and not talking too much and just let them marinate on that stuff. But they need to know that this is the reality of how things work. And I don't think there's anything that we shouldn't include them on, obviously HR stuff and things like that. But, I think they need to know, like even a spreadsheet. This is a spreadsheet. We plug in numbers over here to get calculations so we understand things a little bit better. This is a pro forma,
Hmm.
helps us predict things, just very simple stuff, and as they get older, let them take part in some of these actions. It's work. It's work. And you always think that they have no interest and they're not learning anything, but you find out years later that, yeah, dad, you used to do this with me and I know this and I know that because of this. And you're like, where did this come from? The whole time you just hated me for it.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole time you were just sitting in there not doing anything. So I thought, yeah. Yeah, but I think that goes to a lot of things that we do. Like we don't think that they're paying attention on certain things, and all of a sudden they do something. And you're like, you totally saw me doing something that I wish that you
Yeah.
didn't see me doing. Like, but
Yeah. So my
it's
father, growing up in India, in India, their math skills were like I can't even explain to you their math skills, figuring things out and how they did it. So my dad would tell me that you guys have to learn multiplication tables up until 12. We had to learn multiplication tables up to 30. So we're just in our head like this. We just have to know it. And I'm like, ooh. So I started making out these tables for my kids that they had to learn the multiplication tables up until, and I said, I'm not going all the way to 30, but I'll do up to 20. And they would sit
yeah,
there every day memorizing the multiplication tables all the way up to 20. Do they remember any of it now? Nope, nothing. They literally do not remember any of it, but they
yeah.
remember going through the action of doing it. So the two brothers are upset because I'm not making the sister do it. They're like, why aren't you making her do it? You used to make us do that every single day. So they're like, you just love her more. And I would tell them, yeah, I'm sorry. I just like her better than I liked you guys. They don't know where to go from that answer.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
won't say that it was the brightest thing to do, but because nobody else was doing it. But I thought I was giving them a heads up. I didn't know that they would never remember any of it. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No kidding. It's
some of it's trial and
I
error, man. Some of it's trial and error. Parenting.
Yeah, I think a majority of parenting is trial and error. What works, what doesn't, because each kid is going to be a little bit different as well on what they understand, what they remember, what works for them, and what doesn't. I try to always tell. It's been a while since I've said it to them, but I used to always tell them. I said, dude, I've never been a dad to a 3-year-old before, so I'm learning how to be a 3-year-old the same way you're learning how to be a 3-year-old. And then when he was 5, I was like, I've never been a dad to a 5-year-old before, so I'm trying to learn how to do this. Every day we're learning something new about ourselves, learning something new about how we interact with each other, learning something new about how you learn. And then even when another kid comes into it, well, now I've never had to raise a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old at the same time. So this is something new for me. So I think trial and error is the way that it all goes. I mean, I think even in our business, that's kind of what we do. You said you build out pro forma, and we set up the pro forma to hopefully figure that out. But there's always going to be errors in the pro forma. It's never going to be perfect. So um,
Yeah.
it's trial and error yet again. Um, so I want to kind of go into when you sold the company. How did you get to a point where you decided, like, when were you at the point where you said, okay, I'm going to bring in some private equity and sell a majority of this thing?
So as I was building the company from 2004, around 2000, I don't know if it was 15 or 14. What I started to notice is I was growing, but I didn't have the ability to negotiate higher insurance rates, reimbursements rates. Okay, the
Mm-hmm.
cost of having an employee kept going higher and higher and higher. Meaning our insurance costs, meaning health insurance for our employees, were going higher and higher. The cost of having an employee, the salaries were going higher than the reimbursement was. Like reimbursement wasn't moving, but the salaries were just moving up higher.
Mm-hmm.
The cost of paper was going up. And I said, okay, I see the writing on the wall. Either I have to really, really expand very rapidly so I can control costs, or I have to see, what other options are there. At the same time, I would see these things called accountable care organizations or physician groups being bought out. Like hospital groups would buy out the physicians, right? And then they would tell the
Mm-hmm.
physicians, oh, you have to send all your PT patients to the hospital. So I saw my market share kind of starting to shrink more and more. And I said to myself, well, how do I not just eke by? What's the point of getting this far just to eke by? How do I
Mm-hmm.
10x all this stuff? What are my different options out there? Yes, I can fight the fight. Maybe I can do that. That's an option. Or I can look at what they call strategics, which are other physical therapy companies that want to buy you over. Or I can look at private equity looking to get into the space and partner with them. So I entertained all these different options. And I talked to different people. I talked to them to find out how do they value my company from a monetary standpoint? What are their metrics that they use to value the company? And then I realized, okay, this is what they do. It's a very similar formula. It's always a multiple off an EBITDA, adjusted EBITDA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm like, okay, so the higher I make my company, the more profitable I make my company, the more attractive I look in whatever regard I do. Like, okay, that's good to know. Do I want to do a strategic? Do I want to do private equity? The strategics basically just want you because they want you to be a physical therapist that works treating patients all day.
Yeah.
They give you enough money that you're kind of like, oh, I have enough money in my bank account, but I have to work now all day for you, seeing patients.
Mm-hmm.
I did so much training to become a CEO. I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to just treating patients anymore, because I stepped out of patient treatment altogether, for a while, because I was just running my company. So I said, I don't want to in my head, that was kind of going backwards. It's like having a certain skill set, but not utilizing it. It's like Superman
Mm-hmm.
not utilizing any of his powers. You're like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So I said, a private equity coming in that's new in the space really is hungry for it. They really want to grow, and I could probably help them to grow that. So I started thinking that was the best way. But I said to myself, for the next 2 years, I'm going to go to town working on building up the company, getting that
Mm-hmm.
adjusted EBITDA as high as possible. So when I am ready to sell to a private equity company, I have the highest margins, so I look very attractive to get the highest value for my company. And that's what I did. So I thought that was the best way for me to catapult my company to 10x it, for me personally.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it was.
It's
A lot of
planned.
people that I talk to yeah, I mean, you've had to plan it out and kind of like research, it's the same thing when we're buying an apartment building, right? We have to look at, okay, what's our exit plan? What's our exit strategy? How do we
Yeah.
want to build this? And then you operate the property in the way that is going to make sense for your exit strategy. Obviously you want, exit strategy A, B, and C. But you want to drive towards exit strategy A. And if you actually know where you're going, then you can go there. It's one of those things that if you don't know what your goals are, it's very hard to chase your goals if you don't have them written down. It's very hard to chase what your business plan is if you don't, understand what it is that you're shooting for.
Yeah.
Given the fact that this is the Biz Dad podcast, I look at it. I've been recently very strongly looking at that in the family side as well. Like, where do we actually want to go as a family? What are our goals as a family? What are we driving towards as a family? Because I do these things in the business, right? And I've got core values for my business to say, hey, we're family based off these core values. We're implementing EOS. We have our goals. We have our rocks. We have all this stuff. What are we doing as a family? Like, are we driving towards something as a family, or are we just going, milling around? If you're just milling around, who knows where you're going to end up? But in your case, you said, hey, no, what I want to do is get my EBITDA as high as I can to be able to make this a sellable company. So I'm just genuinely curious about how, once you got your EBITDA to a certain point, how do you go about finding folks who are wanting to, private equity firms that are looking for this type of
Yeah.
thing? How do you go shopping?
Well, to be honest, in my market, it was the opposite. They're coming after you hard and heavy,
Nice.
constantly, because they knew that this is the market that they wanted to be in. So you're getting like everybody coming after you. I just happened to know of some people that were in private equity that were starting this vertical, meaning they didn't have physical therapy and they wanted it so bad. So it was an opportunity for me to get in on the ground floor. And I was taking a big risk because they didn't have physical therapy before. So they didn't know what they were doing when it comes to physical therapy. But I was young enough, and I still kept a lot of shares of my own in the company that said I can help them. And if everything goes to crap, I'll start over again. Let me take that. Let me risk it. I don't care. It was more of that type of thing. So
And
it
you
wasn't
stayed
that I
on for
had to
a
go
while too,
searching.
right?
They were searching. Oh yeah, you're required to. They're not going to buy you
Okay.
over unless you're staying on. So you have an agreement too. Plus,
Nice.
you're higher. So what happens is when they buy you, they don't buy 100%. They buy a certain percentage.
Hmm.
depending on how much you want to give up. I want to keep a sizable chunk. And the reason you do that is because once they buy you over and you start to build, when you build, you're now, if you think about it, your enterprise value significantly increases because your adjusted EBITDA is not this anymore. It's based on the
Yeah.
whole enterprise. So your adjusted EBITDA goes up, which means your multiple now is way higher. So if you
Hmm.
still have a percentage of that, of common shares, that kind of for the whole company, and the
Yeah.
and the EBITDA significantly grows, and somebody offers you a much higher multiple, now you're going to get paid out for the remaining shares that you have at a much higher rate. So it's like
For
you're
sure.
incentivized to help the company grow. You want the company to
Yeah.
grow because your exit is going to be much higher.
Hmm. Yeah. Because to your point earlier, like the team that was buying you, they don't have any PT clinics, so they definitely need you to be there to be able to run those operations and make that happen and make it a successful operation.
Yeah.
Um, and if you
Yeah,
have a
and to
sizable
help
enough
them
chunk,
honestly, because
yeah.
yeah, because the CEO or their whole team, like they're setting up operations. So I was helping them with KPIs, which are key performance indices, and kind of
Hmm.
rolling out like how are you supposed to do this, how are we supposed to do that, in many ways. So
Yeah.
you know that's how it went from 4 or 5 offices to over 100.
That's phenomenal.
You're also
And
buying
then
other offices, and then you're putting together offices, and then I took different roles while I was there.
that sounds exciting. That sounds like a lot of fun. When do you get to the point where you then sold the whole thing? Right? You built offices, then you then sold out the rest of it after that, correct? Like you had the final exit. How is that decision
Yeah.
going? How did you get to that point?
So after COVID was over, we had kind of recalculated where we were, and we realized that we needed a much better and stronger capital partner. Meaning, we had a private equity company that got us started, but now we needed a bigger one to be able to infuse more money into us, so we can actually
Hmm.
grow even more. Which means you're basically trading up for another higher private equity company. So you go to market to sell your practice, and you're using brokers who kind of do blind bidding, and everybody comes to the table and puts their bids in, and you could see everything that's happening behind the scenes,
Hmm.
but they can't. And then people are bidding against each other, which they don't even realize. And then the
Yeah.
highest bidder wins. So yeah,
Nice.
the process is interesting watching it from the background and seeing what's happening. And some people are bidding way over what other people are bidding, and you're like, wow,
Hmm.
this person bid way higher. And then you realize that this person bid way higher because they lost the last two opportunities because somebody outbid them. So this time they don't
Yeah.
want to lose the opportunity, so they're overbidding.
Yeah. And boy, I guess they would awfully heavy business plan at that point too if they're overbidding that high to be able
That's
to
what
make sure that
happens.
it's
Then
yeah.
as you can imagine, they have to come in and with an aggressive plan to grow
Yeah.
really fast and really hard and cut costs and things like that. So after I left, the management team that's left over, they're really running hard to try to
Hmm.
achieve those things. And then, then all of a sudden the markets turned and interest rates turned, and then they kind of had to say, okay, well, our plan that we had for this many years now has to go for this many years.
Yeah. Yeah, and constantly reassessing and adjusting what's going on. But so let's go into now what you're doing now. So you kind of had a solid exit, and now you kind of get to go off and do a different set of things, growing different businesses. So let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing now. Now that you've sold that off.
So while I was exiting, I was investing, I think I was mentioning before, in syndications. Okay.
Hmm.
Bringing capital to that. And then some of the syndicators I would get to know. And then they said that, oh, you're done with your company. Do you want to help us? And I said, help you how? They're like, well, you keep bringing so much money to us syndicators, maybe you want to do it more formally, start helping us with raising capital and things like that. And I said, I don't really want to be a capital raiser. That's not really what I want to do. Plus, I had just exited out of my situation, out of my company, and I said, "Oh, I want to
Hmm.
relax. I want to do this. I had all these plans." And 2 weeks later, I said, "I'm bored. I need something to keep my focus." And see, the truth is, what people don't realize, and nobody feels bad for you, but here's the dirty little secret: when all you've been doing for the last 20 something years is building a company, and you're getting up at
Hmm.
5 in the morning, and that's what you're on the treadmill and you're working out, and you're thinking, "How do I make my company better and stronger?" And you're going to sleep thinking that. That's your passion. That's your focus, right? When you finally achieve what you're looking for, which is to sell the company, all of a sudden that's gone, and now you're like, well, what do
Hmm.
I do? Yeah, you take a vacation, but then afterwards you're like, well, what is my passion now? What
Yeah.
is the thing that I'm focused on? So I quickly realized I didn't have enough in there. I thought I did with hobbies and things like that, but after a couple hours a day and I did all that, it's like, okay, that's not enough.
Yeah.
So I realized I need to do something else. So that's why when people reached out to me, I said, yeah, let me help. So I built a consulting company. Um, and in the consulting company, what happened was I didn't want to be a capital raiser, but I knew I had enough information that I've helped enough syndicators and I knew enough about real estate that I could help in a different way. At the same time, I was getting reached by people in physical therapy, what we call healthcare services, which is any company that's healthcare that's facing um, customer facing. Any
Hmm.
physician office that treats customers, any eye doctor that's I knew I had experience in building that type of scenario. So I wanted to stay in touch with private equity, healthcare private equity. So I still go to a lot of healthcare private equity, like conferences and things like that to stay in touch with them. Um, because that's what I came from. So I still want to
Yeah.
stay in touch with it. On the other end on the real estate end of it, what I had put together was, for certain syndicators, they're good operators, right? But when it comes to capital raising or raising capital, um, they don't want to have the nurturing of talking to investors constantly. What they've done in the past was call mom, dad, aunt, uncle, and friends. But once you're trying to scale operations, you can't just keep calling mom, dad for the
Yeah.
same amount of money again and again and again as they're trying to raise. But they haven't put anything together that says, okay, this is how we constantly raise. And I had experience doing it because I was doing it for so often. So my company now acts like an outsourced investor relations department for syndicators that we fully vet out, that we're like, these guys are good operators. They've done so many different deals. They've had so many different cycles. They have a
Hmm.
good management team, but they just haven't figured out the investor portion of it. So we act as their investor relations department. So in certain cases, we have different clients. We'll help put together pro formas that are for this one. I'll give you an example. For this one family, that's a family office. They do all their own real estate deals internally, right? They don't have retail investors that are like
Yeah.
people like regular people investing. So they don't even know what that looks like. They don't know how that conversation goes. They don't know what the pro forma for that looks like. So we had to build a pro forma, put a pref rate in, put different hurdles in. So we kind of help with that. We put together webinars. We would talk on the webinars and explain to retail investors, this is the investment. We put together a landing page. We put together a funnel. We would be at the end
Hmm.
of the funnel. We capture them on the potential investors, and we talk to them to invest. So that's what we did for that one family. For another company, we act as the end of the funnel. We're talking to investors. It's just not one conversation, right? When you're talking to
Yeah.
investors, the nurturing program. So that's what we've been doing for different syndicators.
Yeah. That's awesome. How did I mean, eh, you already had obviously a network of folks that you've been working with and all this stuff. How are you growing that particular? Is it more word of mouth? Is it,
Yeah.
what is it right now?
It really is a lot of word of mouth because it's a trust scenario, because
Hmm.
it's not like, hey, you know what, let me just look up somebody's website, which, by the way, I'm guilty. I have not even got a chance to finish or put together my website. I have a URL, but I haven't even done anything with it, because most of
Hmm.
ours is everybody who knows you already or knows you in the industry or refers you to somebody else, and people know you that way. So it's all referral
Yeah.
based. But yeah, so it's really just referral based business right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think that especially with where you're at, um, I would imagine this is just me putting on my own thoughts onto you, but it's probably a great comforting feeling for you to just hang out there with the referral rather than build this other thing. It sounds like it's rather successful right now. Anyways, what is your plan for the future? Is that how you want to keep that going, or are you looking to grow this to a much larger degree than just word of mouth?
So I've been busy working in the business, which I'm guilty of right now, and I
Hmm.
need to
Hmm.
work on the business. So I need to sit down and spend some time working on the business over the holidays, and actually put together like what am I going to do beyond what I'm doing right now to
Yeah.
scale it, to make it even better, and to we can handle. So the thing is about our business, we can only handle a certain amount of clients, and we're not looking to handle a lot of clients. We actually want to keep small, but
Yeah.
the clients that we do handle, we want to take care of really well. So now it's like, how do you scale these operations, but still give good quality to those people? So that's what I need to go to work and figure out, and like say, okay, how do we do it? And, in a way that is, helpful to the client at the same time, but still putting together a business as opposed to working
Hmm.
in the business constantly.
So, have you included the kids into these new ventures now, or not yet on this stuff?
they hear me on calls all the time. They hear me talking about real estate stuff all the time. And I had so as you know, I'm in GoBundance. You know, we're both in
Hmm.
GoBundance. So my son, who's 15, I said, hey, you know, there's somebody's putting together this thing for GoBundance for kids right around your age group. Do you want to maybe join? At least appear for the 2 Zoom calls that they
Yeah.
have. And he's like, okay, Dad, fine. The first one, he missed it. And I'm like, how did it go? He's like, oh, I got busy. I'm like, don't, just tell me the truth. He's like, I forgot. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. All right. Try next time. So he went. He's like, Dad, it was kind of boring. They talked about this. He's like, I hear you talking about this stuff all the time, so I already knew. I'm like, you're telling me you knew everything? He's like, yeah, I already knew what they were talking about. I already knew all that stuff. I'm like, fine, just go to one more. See what you get
Hmm.
out of it. Goes to the next one. Same exact thing. I already know this stuff. They're not talking about anything new. I'm like, all right, if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. So they hear me talking about stuff, and apparently
Yeah.
they're learning something, or they say they're learning something, but it's like one of those things. You can't shove this stuff down their throat. So if they
Yeah.
either want it or they don't want
Yeah. Well, ain't that the truth? I mean, and it seems that the more you try to shove something down a kid's throat, the more they kind of walk away from it, anyways, right? And you don't want that to be,
it.
they don't
Yeah.
want to disdain you for it. So, um,
My son has more interest than my daughter. My daughter has no interest in any of this stuff. So it's
yeah.
like I have to pick and choose my battles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat where my daughter's the youngest. She's only 6 months old right now, so we'll see how it all goes. I'm very curious to see as we grow up, or as they grow up, what that looks like. It's very similar in ages of yours as far as the spread goes. It's about to be 9, about to be 5 and 6 months. So every 4 years, we were having a kid. Um, but man, like it, and well, I'm just got a bunch of thoughts going through my brain right now that don't really tie to this at all. But I'm also curious, like as I'm looking at, okay, well, with an 8 year spread between my oldest and my youngest, like the world that they're growing up in is going to be so much different as
Yeah,
well. Like, what am I going to be able to
it's
expose
true.
my daughter to that I didn't get to expose my son to? What am I exposing my son to that my daughter's not going to have any clue about? Like, what a different world it's going to be in 8 years, But yeah, we'll see how it all goes. Time will tell.
You roll with
Uh,
it. That's what you do. You
yeah,
roll with it.
that's about all you can do, right? That's one thing I do like about golf, though. Is golf is just going to be golf. So if we all go out there and golf, then we'll be all right. We still need to
Which,
go out
by
there.
the way, just so you know, we didn't talk about this, but I'll just briefly tell you. So when I went to, after I graduated high school, I went to a physical therapy school. I went to a school that had physical therapy in it. It was called Kane College in New Jersey. 2.5 years into it, they said they were going to start changing the program into a master's program, which basically meant that, hey, I was thinking that I was going to apply in a year or two because you can get in, as long as you fill prerequisites, you can get right into the professional schooling. They were going to change it to, hey, you have to finish your undergraduate degree, then apply to the master's. I was like, oh, crap, they're going to change all of this stuff. So I said, I had finished so many credits because I was doing so many credits per semester. I said, let me
Mm-hmm.
just apply to different programs that I can. And we had a family friend that went to Scotland of all places. Okay. Yeah. Not the country. Okay. And she went to Scotland and she kept raving about how amazing it was. I said,
Yeah,
all right, let me apply. I got in and I said, you know what? I'm going to take the opportunity. So here I go 2 years into college and I said, I'm going to Scotland. So I went to Aberdeen, Scotland, to Robert Gordon University for physical
man,
therapy.
oh
So I
man.
was there for about 3 years. Best experience of my life. And I tell my kids all the time, because I was able to be there, I was able to travel around Europe. We'd get
Mm-hmm.
holidays and we'd go travel around Europe. We'll go to Amsterdam for a weekend. We'll go to Ireland for a weekend. We go to, for spring break, instead of coming home, I went to Spain for 2 weeks, or we would go to Austria, or we just travel around that area. But that was
That's so
phenomenal
awesome.
because it was the best experience of my life.
Yeah.
So in Scotland, the home of golf. And guess what?
Yes.
I barely played when I was there. I
Ah,
barely even had scotch when I was there.
that's a shame. So that's one of my bucket list things is to take my dad to Scotland to go golf. To
Ah,
Scotland and Ireland, take him on a bucket list trip out to Scotland and do golf. I also I want to golf the Robert Trent Jones golf trail with my dad and my 2 boys. We'll see. I mean, if my daughter
nice.
wants to golf more too, we'll see how that goes. And we'll have to have a threesome out there instead of a foursome thing.
There you go.
But it's one of my bucket list things on there too, is to say, hey, those are 2 of the trips I
Yeah.
definitely want to do. But
I brought my
how
kids
much?
back over there and I said, let's go to St. Andrews. And I said, we're going to take a picture over at this bridge. They didn't get it, but they will one
Uh-huh.
day.
Yeah, yeah. So, how much travel have you done with your kids, and what Is that something that seems to be a part of your guys' family, or is it not really something you guys are
We,
all about?
we would try to get to Europe. We would do one Caribbean trip and one European trip a year. So we did
Nice.
quite a bit of. They love beach vacations, but I want them to see the world. So we brought them to Spain. We brought them to England, Scotland. We brought them to Italy. So we did a bunch of different things over there, and then the Caribbean stuff just to relax a little bit.
Nothing on the Asia side?
That we didn't get that far because when the kids were younger, we just wanted to avoid those long hauls. But yes, I would personally like to go to Asia, but yeah, not yet is
Yeah,
the answer.
we lived in Japan for 3 years, and I absolutely loved it.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was we were there for the military side of the house. But, my second kiddo, Rourke, he was born in Japan, and my oldest like
Wow.
really learned how to eat sushi there. He was a year and a half when we moved there, and he started, we eat sushi all the time, and you could eat sushi over there for like $25. We'd feed the whole family, and we'd be stuffed, right? Here, it's like $25 for him, and it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
slow down, right? But we got to America, and he looked at the sushi that we had here, and he's like, "What the heck is this? Like, there's sauces all over it. What is this?" Because
Yeah.
you go to Japan, and it's all
Like
about the
six,
fish. So,
like six fish in one roll, and you're like, what is it? What am I
yeah,
eating? You're like, nobody knows what you're eating
yep,
because there's so
nobody
much in it.
knows. Just eat it, and it's got like 15,000 sauces on it, and it just was ridiculous. But man, oh man, I loved. So we brought the kids to. I mean, Rourke was very small. He was less than a year, so he's not going to remember any of it. But we brought him to Indonesia. We went out to Bali. We went to Singapore. We brought him to obviously all over Japan. We went out to Spain, and I love being able to travel with them, and as much recently, but we're about to bring them to Mexico here soon, so that'll be fun. It'll be just a short trip
Nice.
on a cruise out to Mexico, but the travel to me is extremely important because of the. So for me, I grew up, as a military brat, I bounced around all over the place, but so I got to learn so many different cultures and so many different people and all these different things, and then I see how much my kids have been exposed to, and understanding what other countries are like and what is great about where we're at compared to a lot of other places, and it's so much fun to watch and learn from, and it's another reason I like the thought of homeschooling, because I would love to like imagine teaching World War II, like Poland, right? Like, hey, we're going
Yeah.
to do World War II today. Let's go to Poland and go to Warsaw and go to Krakow and go check out Auschwitz, and like, holy crap, like that's an in-depth World War II experience, But what would you say was your favorite place you've traveled thus far?
It's funny you just mentioned something because we went to Germany and I
Hmm.
learned obviously about World War II in school. But when I went to Germany, I went to Dachau, which is the
Oh
first
yeah,
concentration camp ever. And I was like, I went there and I looked around. I was like, this is in the middle of a town. They're like, yeah. And then I started to really understand like how everything went
yeah.
down. And so being over there and is very different than actually learning it in a book. So I can't say one of my favorite trips I can tell you, we started in, let's see, where did we start? I think we started in Prague, Czech Republic. We went from there, we went to Austria, and then we went to Budapest, all on a train.
Man,
And we
nice.
stopped in each city, and we're there in each city for about 3 days. So it was great because you see the differences in the countries and things. So that was an amazing trip. Spain for 2 weeks was amazing.
That's so awesome.
Or
Yeah,
just traveling around Scotland. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Even just traveling around Scotland, I would, when you're going to school there, you're on rotation. So you would have to live in a certain part of the Scotland for like
Hmm.
5, 6 weeks. I saw more of Scotland than the average Scottish person because I
Yeah, I
was
bet.
just, you're there. So you want to see everything.
Yeah, it's funny as I tell my au pair, she's here from Brazil, and she's already been. Like, we drove from Florida all the way to Texas, and we still had multiple stops there. I brought her up to Philadelphia and New Jersey, and brought her all over the place. And I told her, I said, "You've already traveled more than most Americans. You're here, as an au pair, and you've already traveled more than most Americans." So, um, I absolutely love it. My favorite trip, I think, thus far, has been Poland. That was one of my most like eye-opening
Really?
experiences. With
Never
it
been.
was just me and my wife. We went there for a wedding. We were there for a couple of weeks. It was phenomenal. Like, we went to Auschwitz, and like that, like what a heartbreaking place that is to be. Um, but what an experience it is. But man, it was interesting. Singapore was really cool too. Like, my kids were just looking at pictures this morning, funny enough, of Singapore, and like they've got this waterfall inside of the mall that is attached to the airport, and it's like just this really cool different area, and you could spend an entire day in the airport, just walking around. But anyways. Well, what other things would you like to kind of discuss that maybe we haven't hit on yet, that you really wanted to kind of maybe discuss, or any questions that you have for me or anything like that?
I will tell you that, I find myself in a very unique position now with my company because we have companies that reach out to us that want our help. So
Hmm.
in order for us to help them, we have to do a lot of due diligence on them to see, are they good providers? Are they, do they do a good job doing what they do? So I feel like we do a lot of good jobs, a job of vetting people out and who we think we want to
Hmm.
work with, because if we're going to offer this to our friends and family, we need to make sure they're doing a good job. And then
Yeah.
once we do, then I share it with my friends and family. And I feel like I have the inside track on certain good people who are doing some really good things. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I can at least tell them who we've kind of worked with and who we feel are really good operators for different spaces. And it could be self storage, it could be
Hmm.
multifamily, it could be just different things that we've kind of seen. So it's an opportunity just to, they can look at whoever else they want. But the problem is, everybody's advertising everything, and
Yeah.
pro formas doesn't mean that they're going to hit it. But when
Yeah.
somebody else has kind of did some work and say, hey, these guys have been consistent, you might want to look at them. It just gives a different
Hmm.
angle. So yeah, I'd
How
love to
have
be
you
able to share
been?
my email with people so they can
Oh,
actually
for
reach
sure.
out to me if they're interested.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead and say it now so we don't forget it, and then we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. It's Amit, Amit, period, Gaglani, Gaglani, at agmgmtinc.com.
Whew. All right.
Yeah, I
So
know.
yeah, well,
Sounded great when I was putting it together, and it looks great on a
of
business
course.
card. But yeah, saying it
Yeah.
out loud,
Yeah.
that's not so easy.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like one of my, the education company, Active Duty Passive Income is the name of our company, and we like that's our email address, Active Duty Passive Income, and it's like such a long thing to sit there and type out. But but yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are right now on the real estate market, where it's kind of been going. Like interest rates have been going high, all this stuff. What have you been seeing with your operators that you've been talking to?
Yeah.
Like, how are they kind of weathering the storm, and how are they now asking you to communicate with investors, or how are they communicating about investors with what's going on?
So personally, what I have seen is the very large operators aren't saying, "Hey, this deal is a 5 year deal." They're saying this year is a longer time frame. They'd rather
Hmm.
say longer time frame because they know that the bumps will get smoothed out, because we don't know
Yeah,
what the interest rate market's going to be in the very short term, right? So
yeah,
why are you going to tell an investor, "Hey, invest in this deal, and in the next 3 years you're going to get this return"? Well, we don't know what the
yeah,
interest rates are going to be. How are you going to make a pro forma built on that? But if you say 7, 8, 10 year hold, things will smooth out. And then your targets that you're going to reach for are going to be based on the fact that rents are going to progressively go up. They're not going to shoot up so dramatically, but you weather a lot of storms if you're there for a longer period of time. As you know, your net operating income will continue to increase as rents generally start to increase too. Are they
hmm,
going to are they going to reset? Yeah, in certain areas. We deal with some people that are in the Midwest, and if you look at the stats, the Midwest is where a lot of people are, believe it or not, are migrating to, and their stats just
yeah,
continue to go up with rents, right? And then there's emerging markets over there where there's companies that are moving into certain areas. Well, that's there's more growth in that area. So
hmm,
not projecting huge like rent growths, but stable things that are stable. So what I'm seeing in the market is longer time frames from large investors. Large multifamily
yeah,
providers are not saying 5 years anymore. They'd
yeah,
rather say longer term, because nobody wants to tell an investor 5 years and it turns out, hey, sorry, it's going to be 7 years. Then you get
yeah,
people are upset. But if you tell people 7, 10 years or whatever it is, and it turns out 7 to 10 years, they can't really, everybody
yeah,
knows that that's what it is. If it turns out to be great and you can sell sooner, everybody's happy. Right?
yeah.
Rather you say longer and it turns out to be shorter, but there's more set in reality. You know,
Yep. Under promise,
it
over
does
deliver.
change the
That's
IRR because
yeah.
it does change the IRR because the IRR is calculated by the shortness of the time frame.
Hmm.
If you can get the money back shorter, then the IRR is bigger. But IRR should be just one metric somebody looks at, not the only metric.
Yeah, it always kills me when that's the only thing that people look at. Especially like I like to be able to look at things from a very long term horizon. And if I hold on to the same for 15 years, then my IR looks like garbage, right? But because
Oh yeah, but you're
but
a
if
more
my
stable
goal,
operator because you've been
yeah,
doing it.
yeah, and my goal is to hold on to these things. So it's like, hey, I'm like whatever. If I'm going to hold on to these things for a long time, then it, I don't care about my IR. And if my investors do, then they're probably not my type of investor. should probably find different investors. So, and I try to teach that to people
Yeah.
all the time. Like, match your investor to what you want. Like, don't just take an investor just because they have money. Take an investor because they're in line with what your goals are and what you're trying to get done. So, otherwise, you're just going to have a pain in the butt investor on your hands. So, but,
Correct. Correct.
all right. Well, Amit, I greatly appreciate having you on. It was wonderful to chat with you. I look forward to hopefully seeing you in person because we haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person yet. But are you going to Vermont by chance? I think I was doing the pre-call, but I don't remember.
Yes, I
All
will.
right.
I
Well,
actually just signed up for it the other day.
yeah. Well, I will see you there because I'll be there.
I
My
got my
wife and
skis
kids will
ready
be
to
there.
go.
There you go. Yes. I can't wait to go. I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a little too long since I've been to an event. Um, I went to an affiliate event a couple months ago, but a national event I look to for sure. Thank you again so much for jumping on. It was a pleasure to chat with you. We've already got your email. Is there anything else that you want to pass on to folks if they want to reach out to you? Well, not your website because you said you haven't built that out yet. But but other than your email,
Yeah,
anything
no, if
else you
they
want to
just
pass
reach
on?
out to me via email, that'll be great because I'd love to help people and I
Okay,
love to have at least conversations about what they're looking for and what they're interested in.
awesome. Well, thank you again so very much. I appreciate it. And everybody, please reach out if you think it's going to be a good match with Amit. And as I'm supposed to say, I think at the end of all these, please like, subscribe, all those types of things. And listen to these episodes at least 17 times. Build it up so I can reach my goals. And then we'll kind of go from there. But thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you again, Amit. And we'll talk to you soon.